The fog rolled in from Puget Sound like a living thing, thick and gray, swallowing the jagged coastline of Cape Mercy in its cold embrace. It was the kind of fog that muted the world, turning the crash of waves against the rocky shore into a distant, dreamlike whisper. The air tasted of salt and pine, sharp and clean, cutting through the lungs with every breath. Lieutenant Commander Jake Mercer stood on the weathered deck of his grandfather's cabin, a tin mug of black coffee steaming in his calloused hands. He was a man built for violence but craving peace, broad-shouldered with the dense, coiled muscle of a predator at rest. His dark hair was cut military short, and his gray-green eyes held the thousand-yard stare of someone who had seen too much and carried it all in silence. At 34, he looked older, the lines around his eyes carved by desert sun and the weight of command. Beside him, sitting perfectly still in the morning mist, was Odin. The Belgian Malinois was a monument of controlled power, 75 pounds of muscle, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. His tan and black coat was thick against the coastal chill, his triangular ears swiveling independently, tracking sounds Jake's human ears couldn't detect. Odin had been Jake's partner for 6 years, through 3 deployments, 2 Purple Hearts, and more close calls than either of them cared to remember. They had retired together 6 months ago, Jake medically discharged after taking shrapnel to his left shoulder, Odin aging out of active service at 8 years old. They were both trying to forget. "Easy morning," Jake murmured, more to himself than the dog. Odin's ear twitched, acknowledging the words, but his gaze remained fixed on the tree line, ever vigilant. The dog didn't know how to turn off, and neither did Jake. The cabin was a relic, hand-built by Jake's grandfather in the 1950s, perched on a cliff overlooking the sound. It was 20 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a single gravel logging road that wound through dense Douglas fir and Sitka spruce. No cell signal, no internet, no distractions, just the wind, the waves, and the blessed absence of explosions. Jake had been here for 2 weeks, and the nightmares were finally starting to lose their edge. He took a sip of coffee, feeling the burn ground him in the present. The sun was trying to break through the fog, casting the world in shades of silver and pearl. For the first time in years, Jake felt something close to calm. Odin's low growl shattered it. The sound was barely audible, a vibration deep in the dog's chest, but Jake's body responded instantly. His spine straightened. His hand, which had been loose on the mug, tightened. He set the coffee down on the railing with deliberate care and turned to look at his partner. Odin's hackles were raised, a ridge of fur standing along his spine. His eyes were locked on something far down the coastal road, invisible through the fog. "What is it, boy?" Jake whispered, his voice dropping into the command tone that had led men through firefights. Odin didn't bark. He was too well trained for that. But his body language was clear. Threat. Unknown. Approaching. Jake's instincts, honed by a decade of warfare, kicked in. He moved back into the cabin, his bare feet silent on the wood planks. He went to the locked gun safe in the corner, spinning the combination with muscle memory. Inside was his personal sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226, cleaned and loaded. He checked the chamber, tucked it into the back of his jeans, and grabbed a pair of binoculars from the shelf. When he returned to the deck, Odin hadn't moved. The dog was a statue, every sense locked onto the distant threat. Jake raised the binoculars, scanning the fog-shrouded road below. At first, he saw nothing. Then, headlights. 2 vehicles moving fast, too fast for the treacherous coastal road. A black SUV in the lead, followed by a silver sedan that fishtailed around the curves, barely maintaining control. "Not locals," Jake muttered. Locals knew this road. They respected it. The vehicles disappeared around a bend, heading deeper into the isolated peninsula. Away from town, away from help. Jake lowered the binoculars. Every instinct he possessed was screaming. He looked down at Odin, who met his gaze with amber eyes that held an unspoken question. Do we engage? Jake had come here for peace. He had promised himself he was done with missions, done with violence, done with putting himself between evil and the innocent. But somewhere down that road, someone was running, and someone else was chasing. "Damn it," Jake whispered. He went back inside, pulled on his boots, grabbed his tactical jacket. "Odin, load up." The Belgian Malinois was on his feet instantly, trotting to the door. The mission had found them. 8 miles down the coast, in the suffocating interior of the silver sedan, Elena Vasquez was dying by inches. Not from a bullet, not yet, but from the crushing weight of terror that had turned her blood to ice and her hands into useless trembling things on the steering wheel. Elena was 28 years old, with dark eyes that had once sparkled with ambition and hair pulled back in a desperate ponytail. She wore jeans and a gray hoodie, civilian clothes that did nothing to hide the truth. She was a forensic accountant for the Washington State Attorney General's office, and for the past 6 months, she had been building the case that would dismantle the Russian Bratva, the Russian organized crime syndicate that had sunk its roots deep into the Pacific Northwest's shipping industry. She had followed the money. Millions of dollars in laundered cash flowing through shell companies, real estate deals, and legitimate businesses turned into fronts. She had spreadsheets, bank records, shipping manifests. She had everything, and they knew it. The black SUV behind her surged forward, its reinforced bumper slamming into her rear panel. Elena's sedan lurched, the steering wheel jerking in her hands. She screamed, fighting for control as the vehicle skidded toward the cliff's edge. At the last second, she wrenched it back onto the road, her tires shrieking. "Please, God, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She had tried calling 911 15 miles back, but there was no signal. She had tried outrunning them, but the sedan was no match for the SUV. She was trapped on a peninsula with nowhere to go but forward, toward the dead end at Mercy Point. In the back seat, secured in a custom K9 harness, was her only companion, Bailey. Bailey was a 3-year-old golden retriever, a therapy dog Elena had adopted after her mother's death 2 years ago. The dog was trembling, whining, her soft brown eyes wide with fear. She wasn't trained for combat. She wasn't trained for anything but love. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Elena reached back with one shaking hand, her fingers brushing Bailey's fur. "It's okay, girl. It's okay. I won't let them hurt you." It was a lie. Elena knew it was a lie. She had seen what these men were capable of. She had cataloged their crimes in spreadsheets and depositions. They didn't leave witnesses. They didn't leave evidence. The SUV rammed her again, harder this time. The sedan's back windshield exploded in a shower of safety glass. Bailey yelped, cowering against the seat. Through her rearview mirror, Elena saw the passenger window of the SUV roll down. A man leaned out, thick-necked, bald, with a face carved from granite. This was Dmitri, the Bratva's enforcer. He raised a pistol, aiming not at her tires but at her. Elena jerked the wheel left, and the bullet sparked off the road beside her. The sedan veered wildly, clipping the guardrail. Metal screamed against metal. And then, ahead, she saw it. The end of the road. Mercy Point. A gravel lot overlooking a sheer drop into the Sound, where jagged rocks jutted from the surf like broken teeth. There was nowhere left to run. Elena slammed on the brakes, the sedan skidding to a stop in a cloud of dust and gravel. She threw the car into park, her hands fumbling with her seatbelt. She looked back at Bailey, at the dog's terrified, trusting eyes. "I'm so sorry," Elena sobbed. "I'm so sorry I brought you here." The SUV's doors opened. 3 men stepped out. Dmitri took his time. He had learned long ago that fear was a weapon sharper than any blade, and the best way to wield it was with patience. He walked toward the silver sedan, his boots crunching on the gravel, his pistol held low and casual at his side. Behind him, his 2 associates fanned out. Yuri, a wiry man with dead eyes and a background in the Spetsnaz, and Gregor, a mountain of a human being who preferred his fists to firearms. The fog swirled around them, turning the scene into something from a nightmare. The Sound churned below, indifferent and eternal. Dmitri tapped on the driver's window with the barrel of his gun. "Miss Vasquez," he called, his accent thick, his tone almost friendly. "Please, step out of the vehicle. We need to talk." Inside the car, Elena didn't move. She couldn't. Her body had locked up, every muscle frozen in primal terror. Dmitri sighed. He wasn't annoyed. He was disappointed. "You make this harder than it needs to be. We are professionals, yes? This does not have to be painful." He nodded to Gregor. The giant stepped forward, grabbed the door handle, and with a single brutal yank, ripped the door off its hinges. The metal shrieked and twisted, the door clattering to the ground. Elena screamed. Gregor reached in, his massive hand closing around her upper arm like a vice. He dragged her out of the car as if she weighed nothing, her feet scrambling for purchase on the gravel. He threw her to the ground. She landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, her palms scraping on the rocks. "Please," Elena gasped, looking up at Dmitri through her tears. "Please, I didn't tell anyone. I swear I didn't." "Shh, shh, shh," Dmitri said, crouching down beside her. He reached out, almost gently, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know you did not tell anyone. Not yet. But you have files, yes? Documents? Evidence? Where are they?" I don't." Dimitri's hand moved with viper speed, slapping her across the face. The crack echoed across the point. Elena's head snapped to the side, blood filling her mouth. "Do not lie to me, little bird," Dmitri whispered. "It insults us both." In the back seat of the sedan, Bailey began to bark, a high, frantic sound. She lunged against her harness, trying to reach her owner, her claws scrabbling against the leather. Dmitri looked at the dog. His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Yuri," he said, "bring the animal." Yuri opened the back door, reaching for Bailey's harness. The golden retriever, terrified and protective, did something she had never done in her life. She snapped at him, her teeth clicking shut inches from his hand. Yuri jerked back, startled. Then he smiled, a thin, cruel expression. He pulled a telescoping baton from his belt, extending it with a sharp snick. "No!" Elena screamed, trying to crawl toward the car. Gregor's boot came down on her back, pinning her to the ground. "Don't touch her. Please, she's just a dog. She doesn't know anything." Yuri struck Bailey across the ribs. The dog yelped, a sound of pure pain and betrayal, and collapsed onto the seat. "Stop it," Elena sobbed. "I'll tell you everything. The files are in a safety deposit box in Seattle, box 247, First National. The key is, it's in my apartment. Please, just leave her alone." Dmitri stood, brushing imaginary dust from his expensive coat. "Good. That was not so hard, yes?" He looked at Yuri. "Bring the dog. We go to the water." Elena's blood ran cold. "The water? What? No, please." Dmitri's smile was a dead thing. "You know our business, Ms. Vasquez. You know what we move through these docks. Witnesses who go into the Sound, they do not come back up." Gregor hauled Elena to her feet, his hand clamped around the back of her neck. Yuri dragged Bailey out of the car by her harness, the dog whimpering, limping, her ribs screaming with pain. They walked toward the cliff's edge, where an old fishing dock extended over the water, its pilings green with algae, its planks rotted and treacherous. The fog was so thick Elena couldn't see the rocks below. She could only hear the water, a hungry, churning sound that promised oblivion. Dmitri stopped at the edge of the dock. He looked at Elena with something like pity. "I will make it quick. It is more mercy than you deserve." Behind him, in the mist and the trees, no one saw the shadow watching. The dock groaned under their weight, the ancient wood protesting against the violence it was about to witness. The fog clung to everything, turning the world into a claustrophobic pocket of gray where sound was muffled and distance became meaningless. Elena Vasquez knelt on the splintered planks, Gregor's massive hand still clamped on her shoulder, forcing her down. Her knees ached against the rough wood, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the howling terror in her chest. She couldn't breathe. Every gasp came shallow and panicked, her vision tunneling. 10 feet away, Yuri held Bailey by the scruff of her neck. The golden retriever was whimpering, her legs scrambling uselessly on the slick boards, trying to reach Elena. The dog's ribs were bruised, maybe broken, and every movement made her whine, a sound that cut through Elena like a blade. "You see?" Dmitri said, walking a slow circle around them, his voice conversational, almost philosophical. "In Russia, we have saying, 'The fish does not know, it swims in water until it is on the hook.' You swam in our water, Ms. Vasquez. You did not know, but now." He gestured to the churning sound below. "Now you're on the hook." "Please," Elena whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. "Please, I told you where the files are. You can get them. You can destroy everything. Just let us go. I'll disappear. I'll never—" Dmitri held up a hand, silencing her. "You misunderstand. It is not about the files. Files can be destroyed, yes, but you—" He tapped his temple. "You have seen the names, the faces, the shipments. You are the file, Ms. Vasquez, and files must be deleted." He turned to Yuri. "The dog first. I want her to watch." Elena's scream tore through the fog, raw and primal. "No! God, please, no! Take me! Just take me and leave her!" Yuri dragged Bailey to the edge of the dock. The dog, sensing the danger, began to thrash in earnest, her claws raking at Yuri's forearm. He cursed in Russian, raising his baton again. The blow caught Bailey across the skull. The crack was sickening, wet and hollow. The dog's legs gave out. She sagged in Yuri's grip, her eyes rolling, blood matting the golden fur above her ear. "Bailey!" Elena shrieked, lunging forward. Gregor slammed her back down, his fist driving into her shoulder blade. She collapsed, gasping, her face pressed against the rotting wood. Yuri lifted the barely conscious dog over his head. Below, the water waited, black and churning, studded with jagged rocks that would shred anything that hit them. "Do svidanya, little dog," Yuri said with a grin. He threw. Bailey's limp body arced through the air, a graceless, heartbreaking trajectory toward the rocks and the waves. And then she stopped, not from hitting the water. She stopped mid-air. A figure had materialized from the fog on the lower section of the dock, a platform 10 feet below the main structure, used for mooring boats. The figure moved with impossible speed, leaping upward, arms outstretched. He caught Bailey against his chest, like a football player snagging a Hail Mary pass, absorbing her weight, twisting his body to take the impact against his own ribs instead of hers. He landed hard on the lower dock, his boots skidding on the wet boards, but he stayed upright. For a moment, the world froze. The three Russians stared, their brains struggling to process what they had just seen. Elena, still pinned to the ground, lifted her head, her vision blurred with tears, and Jake Mercer, cradling the unconscious dog in his arms, looked up at them with eyes that held no mercy. "Bad move," he said, his voice a low, cold rumble that carried over the sound of the waves. Beside him, Odin emerged from the fog. The Belgian Malinois didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply stood there, his lips pulled back to reveal 42 teeth, his body coiled like a spring, waiting for the command. Dmitri recovered first. His hand moved toward his pistol. "Who the hell?" Jake didn't wait for him to finish. He gently laid Bailey on the lower dock, positioning her away from the edge, and then he moved. He didn't climb the ladder to the main dock. He launched himself. His hands grabbed the edge of the upper platform, and with a single fluid pull-up, he vaulted over the railing and onto the main dock, landing in a crouch between Elena and her captors. He rose slowly, deliberately, giving them time to see him fully. 6 feet of corded muscle and controlled violence, wearing faded jeans, a dark jacket, and an expression carved from stone. His right hand rested near his waistband, where the grip of his Sig Sauer was visible. "Let her go," Jake said. It wasn't a request. Gregor laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. He released Elena's shoulder and stepped forward, cracking his massive knuckles. "You think you're hero, Americanettes? You think you saved the girl?" Jake's expression didn't change. "I know I'm about to ruin your day," Gregor charged. The big man moved with surprising speed for his size, his fist cocked back for a haymaker that would have shattered Jake's jaw. But Jake had fought men like Gregor before, big, strong, confident in their power. They always made the same mistake. They thought size was everything. Jake didn't block the punch. He redirected it. He stepped inside Gregor's reach, his left hand catching the giant's wrist, his right hand striking upward in a palm heel that crushed Gregor's nose with a wet crunch. Blood exploded across the man's face. Gregor staggered, blinded, and Jake didn't give him a chance to recover. He hooked his foot behind Gregor's knee and drove his shoulder into the man's center mass, using leverage and momentum to send all 300 pounds of Russian muscle crashing through the dock's railing. Gregor's scream cut off abruptly when he hit the water below. Jake turned to face the other two. His hands were up, his stance balanced. Next, Yuri pulled a knife, a wicked, serrated combat blade. He moved like a trained fighter, circling, his eyes cold and calculating. "Spetsnaz," he said, as if the word explained everything. "I have killed 20 men. You are nothing." 21's gonna be a lot harder," Jake replied. Yuri lunged, the blade slashing toward Jake's throat. The strike was fast, professional, aimed to sever the carotid. Jake swayed back, the knife passing inches from his skin, and, as Yuri's momentum carried him forward, Jake struck. His elbow came down like a hammer on Yuri's wrist. Bone cracked. The knife clattered to the boards. Before Yuri could scream, Jake's knee drove into his solar plexus, expelling every molecule of air from his lungs. Jake followed with a sharp, precise strike to Yuri's temple. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to send him into unconsciousness. The Russian crumpled. 2 down. Dmitri had his pistol out now, the barrel aimed squarely at Jake's chest. His hand was steady, his expression no longer amused. "Enough," Dmitri said. "You're very impressive, yes, but bullet beats fist every time. On your knees." Jake didn't move. He looked at the gun, then at Dmitri, his expression almost bored. "You pull that trigger, and my partner eats your throat before you can chamber a second round." Dmitri's eyes flicked down to the lower dock where Odin crouched, every muscle tensed, his amber eyes locked on Dmitri's throat. The dog was silent, utterly still, but radiating lethal intent. "You think your dog is faster than Bullet?" Dmitri asked, but there was a tremor in his voice now. "I know he is," Jake said. "Odin's got a 40-foot attack range and a 3-second takedown. You're 20 feet away. You do the math." Dmitri's hand wavered. From the ground, Elena watched, her heart hammering. She saw the shift in Dmitri's eyes, the calculation, the fear, the dawning realization that he had walked into a trap he couldn't shoot his way out of. And then she saw something else, Dmitri's finger tightening on the trigger. "Jake!" she screamed. Everything happened at once. Dmitri fired. Jake threw himself sideways, his body moving with practiced precision. Odin didn't wait for a command. The Belgian Malinois exploded from the lower dock, his powerful legs launching him upward. He covered 20 feet in less than 2 seconds, his jaws open, his body a missile of fur and fury. The gunshot was deafening in the fog, the muzzle flash bright. The bullet missed Jake by inches, burying itself in the dock post behind him. Odin hit Dmitri like a freight train. The dog's jaws clamped down on Dmitri's forearm, the arm holding the gun. Dmitri screamed, the pistol falling from nerveless fingers. Odin wrenched his head violently, the motion tearing through muscle and tendon, and drove his weight forward, slamming Dmitri onto his back. Jake was there in an instant. He kicked the gun away, grabbed Dmitri by the collar, and delivered a single, precise strike to the man's jaw. Dmitri's eyes rolled back, and he went limp. Odin released immediately, stepping back, his muzzle stained with blood, his stance protective over the unconscious enforcer. The dock fell silent except for the sound of the waves and Elena's ragged breathing. Jake straightened, rolling his shoulder, the left one, the one with shrapnel still lodged near the bone, and looked down at the 3 unconscious men. Then he turned to Elena, extending his hand. "On your feet," he said, his voice gentler now. "It's over." Elena stared at him, her mind struggling to catch up. She had been seconds from death. Her dog had been seconds from death. And this stranger, this ghost from the fog, had stopped it all. She took his hand. His grip was strong, steady, pulling her up with ease. "Who are you?" she whispered. Jake didn't answer immediately. He looked past her, down at the lower dock where Bailey lay motionless. His expression tightened. "Stay here," he commanded, and before Elena could protest, he vaulted back over the railing, dropping to the lower level. He knelt beside Bailey, his hands moving with surprising gentleness over her battered body. He checked her breathing, shallow but steady. He felt her ribs, bruised, not broken. He examined the gash on her skull, bleeding but not life-threatening. "Tough girl," he murmured, stroking her fur. Bailey's tail twitched weakly. Odin appeared beside him, sniffing the injured dog carefully, his demeanor shifting from warrior to concerned medic. The Malinois let out a soft whine, nosing Bailey's ear. "I know, buddy," Jake said. "We're getting her out of here." He scooped Bailey into his arms, cradling her against his chest, and climbed back up to the main dock. Elena was standing there, shaking, her arms wrapped around herself. "Your dog's going to be okay," Jake told her, "but we need to move now. Those three won't stay down forever, and I'm betting they called for backup." "Who?" Elena's voice cracked. "Who are you?" Jake looked at her, his gray-green eyes hard and unreadable. Someone who was trying to mind his own business. He tilted his head toward the tree line. "Come on. My truck's a quarter-mile back. Can you walk?" Elena nodded numbly. Jake turned, carrying Bailey, Odin falling into step beside him. They moved off the dock into the fog, leaving behind 3 unconscious Russians and the scene of a violence that had been stopped before it could become a tragedy. As they disappeared into the trees, Elena looked back one last time at the churning water below. She had been seconds away from being swallowed by that darkness. Now, following a stranger and his dog into the unknown, she realized something profound. She had just been saved by the kind of man the world pretended didn't exist anymore. A protector, a guardian, a ghost with a gun and a dog who understood that some fights weren't optional. Jake Mercer's truck was a beast. A matte black Ford F-250 with off-road suspension, steel-reinforced bumpers, and windows tinted dark enough to be illegal in most states. It sat hidden in a service road turnout, camouflaged by a curtain of overhanging pine boughs and morning fog. Jake had parked it there 30 minutes earlier after spotting the chase vehicles from his cabin. He'd moved on instinct, taking the high ground, tracking the SUV and sedan through the timber. When they'd stopped at Mercy Point, he'd approached on foot, silent as smoke, Odin shadowing him like a second conscience. He hadn't planned to intervene. He'd told himself he was just reconnaissance, just gathering intelligence, just making sure no one needed. Then he'd seen Yuri throw the dog, and reconnaissance had become a mission. Now, Jake moved through the forest with Elena stumbling behind him, her breath coming in gasps, her legs shaking with adrenaline crash. In his arms, Bailey was a dead weight of soft fur and shallow breathing. The dog's head lolled against his chest, blood matting the golden hair above her ear, but her heartbeat was steady under his palm. Strong. She was a fighter. "Almost there," Jake said over his shoulder, his voice low and calm. He didn't look back. His eyes were constantly scanning, reading the terrain, listening for the sound of pursuit. Odin ranged ahead, his nose to the ground, his body language relaxed. No threats. Yet. They broke through the tree line, and the truck materialized from the fog like something out of a dream. Jake hit the key fob, and the doors unlocked with a soft chirp. He pulled open the back door and gently laid Bailey on the rear bench seat, which was covered with a tactical blanket, waterproof, insulated, designed for field operations. "Get in front," Jake told Elena, his tone leaving no room for argument. She obeyed, moving on autopilot, her mind still locked in the moment when Gregor's hand had been on her neck, when Yuri had raised that baton. The passenger door slammed and she flinched. Jake was already behind the wheel, Odin hopping into the footwell beside him, settling with his head on his paws. Jake started the engine. A deep, authoritative rumble, and threw the truck into gear. He didn't peel out. He drove with controlled precision, navigating the narrow logging road with the ease of someone who knew every rut and washout by heart. For 5 minutes, no one spoke. Elena sat with her hands clenched in her lap, staring at the dashboard, her mind replaying the attack in a loop. The way Dmitri had smiled, the sound of Bailey's yelp, the certainty, absolute and suffocating, that she was about to die. "Thank you." The words came out strangled, barely audible over the engine. Jake glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "Don't thank me yet. We're not clear." "They were going to kill me," Elena whispered, and saying it out loud made it real, made her chest constrict until she couldn't breathe. They were going to kill her, but they didn't. Jake's voice was firm, cutting through her spiral. "Focus on that. They didn't. You're alive. Your dog's alive. The rest is just noise." Elena looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. He was older than she'd initially thought, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped trying to hide it. His left hand on the wheel bore scars, old burns, knife cuts, the topography of violence. But his right hand, resting on the gear shift, moved with the gentleness of someone who understood fragility. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice stronger now. "Jake," he said simply. "Just Jake?" "For now, yeah." Elena's eyes dropped to the center console, where his Sig Sauer sat in a quick-access holster. Military grade, well-maintained. "You're not just some guy who lives in the woods." "No," Jake admitted. "I'm not? Military?" He hesitated. "Navy, SEAL, retired." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Elena had worked with federal agencies long enough to know what it meant. Covert operations, high-value targets, missions that didn't officially exist. The kind of man trained to move through the world like a shadow, to kill efficiently, and to carry the weight of those actions without breaking. Or, at least, without showing the cracks. "Why did you help me?" Elena asked. Jake's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the road. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost introspective. 6 months ago, I watched my spotter take a sniper round meant for me. Kid was 23, had a wife and a baby on the way. I couldn't save him." He paused, swallowing hard. "Today, I could save you. That's reason enough." Elena felt tears sting her eyes again, but this time they weren't from fear. "I don't even know how to—" "Then don't." Jake cut her off, his tone gentler. "Just stay alive long enough to put those bastards in prison. That's the only thank you I need." Behind them, in the truck bed, Bailey stirred. A soft whine floated through the cab. Jake's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "She's waking up. That's good. Means the concussion isn't severe." "How do you know?" Elena asked. "I've had 4 of them," Jake said with a grim smile. "You learn the signs." Odin, from the footwell, let out a low chuff, his version of agreement. The Belgian Malinois shifted, his amber eyes tracking Jake's every movement, waiting for the next command. "Your dog," Elena said, looking down at Odin. "He's not a pet, is he?" "No," Jake said. "Odin's a certified military working dog, explosives detection, close protection, and apprehension. We worked together in Syria, Afghanistan, and Yemen. When I got medically retired, he came with me." "What happened?" Elena asked, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, you don't have to—" "Shrapnel," Jake said, rolling his left shoulder unconsciously. "Roadside IED outside Mosul. Took most of it in my shoulder and upper back. Doctors pulled out what they could, but some of it's still in there. Ended my career." "I'm sorry," Elena said softly. "Don't be. I'm alive. That's more than a lot of guys I served with can say." He glanced at her again, and for the first time, she saw something other than tactical focus in his eyes. Empathy. "You're shaking." Elena looked down at her hands. They were trembling violently, the adrenaline finally draining from her system, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and shock. "It's normal," Jake said. "Your body's been in fight-or-flight mode for God knows how long. It'll pass, but you need to hydrate and eat something." He reached behind his seat, one-handed, and pulled out a battered Camelback hydration pack. "Drink." Elena took it with numb fingers and sucked down lukewarm water. It tasted like metal and salvation. "Where are we going?" she asked after a moment. "My cabin," Jake said. "It's off-grid, no cell signal, and the only access road is a quarter-mile of switchbacks that'll shred the undercarriage of anything that isn't built for it. We hole up, assess the damage, and figure out what the hell you stepped in that was bad enough to send Bratva enforcers after you." Elena's breath hitched. "How did you know they were Bratva?" Jake's smile was cold. "Tattoos. Dmitri's got a cathedral on his chest. Russian prison ink. Means he's high-ranking. And the way they operated, professional, coordinated, no hesitation. It's organized crime, not street thugs." He paused. "You're not just a random target, Elena. You're a specific problem they're trying to delete. So tell me, what did you do?" Elena closed her eyes, the weight of it all crashing down. "I'm a forensic accountant for the Washington State AG's office. For the past 6 months, I've been building a RICO case against the Volkov Bratva, money laundering, extortion, smuggling. I've traced over $200 million through their shell companies." Jake let out a low whistle. $200 million. "Yeah, that'll get you killed." "I was supposed to meet with the FBI today," Elena continued, her voice breaking. "I was bringing them everything. Documents, wire transfers, names. But this morning, someone leaked my location. They were waiting outside my apartment. I ran. I thought if I could just get to the coast, if I could just get to somewhere remote, they'd lose me." She laughed bitterly. "Stupid." "Not stupid," Jake said. "Optimistic. There's a difference." He took a sharp turn onto an even narrower road, the truck bouncing over ruts. "But you're right about one thing. They'll keep coming. Men like Dmitri, they don't quit because they lost round 1. They regroup, call in reinforcements, and come back harder." "So, what do we do?" Elena asked, and she hated how small her voice sounded. Jake looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the cold, hard certainty of a man who had spent a decade surviving impossible situations. "We don't run," he said. "We fight. But first, we make sure you and your dog survive the night. Then, we figure out how to burn their whole operation to the ground." The truck climbed higher into the mountains, swallowed by fog and forest, carrying its cargo of wounded warriors toward a temporary sanctuary. Behind them, miles down the coast, Dmitri was waking up on the dock, his broken arm cradled against his chest, his face twisted with rage. And he was making a phone call. The cabin materialized from the fog like a fortress carved from the wilderness itself. Jake's grandfather had built it with his own hands in 1952, a testament to post-war self-reliance and the stubborn belief that a man needed a place where the world couldn't reach him. The structure was solid Douglas fir, weathered silver gray by decades of coastal storms, with a stone chimney that rose like a sentinel against the pine canopy. The windows were small, defensible, and the single door was reinforced steel disguised with wood veneer. Jake parked the truck behind the cabin, out of sight from the access road. He killed the engine, and the silence that followed was profound, the kind of quiet that only existed miles from civilization, where the only sounds were wind through branches and the distant cry of a bald eagle. "Stay here," Jake said, his hand moving to the Sig Sauer on his hip. "Let me clear it first." "You think they followed us?" Elena asked, her voice tight with renewed fear. "I think, assuming they didn't, is how you get dead," Jake replied. He opened his door, and Odin flowed out ahead of him, nose to the ground, body low and alert. Elena watched through the windshield as man and dog moved around the cabin in a choreographed sweep, checking windows, testing the door, scanning the tree line. It took less than 2 minutes. When Jake reappeared and gave her a short nod, she finally exhaled. "Clear. Bring the dog, carefully." Elena climbed out and opened the rear door. Bailey was awake now, her brown eyes glassy with pain and confusion. When she saw Elena, her tail gave a weak thump. "Hey, girl," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "Hey, sweet girl, you're okay. You're safe now." Bailey tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. The blow to her head had left her disoriented, and the damage to her ribs made every breath a visible effort. "Let me," Jake said, appearing at Elena's shoulder. With the same gentleness he'd shown before, he scooped Bailey into his arms, cradling the 60-pound retriever like she weighed nothing. Bailey didn't resist. She laid her head against his chest and let out a long, shuddering sigh. Inside, the cabin was Spartan but functional. A single main room with a kitchenette, a wood stove, and a loft accessible by a steep ladder. The furniture was minimal: a worn leather couch, a pine table, 2 chairs. But what caught Elena's attention was the organization. Everything had a place, and every place told a story. A gun safe in the corner, a tactical med kit on the shelf, a radio setup that looked military grade, maps on the wall marked with routes and coordinates. This wasn't just a cabin, it was an operations center. Jake laid Bailey on the couch, covering her with a thick wool blanket. Odin immediately hopped up beside her, curling his body protectively around the injured retriever. Bailey's nose touched Odin's, a moment of silent canine communication, and some of the tension left her frame. "He'll watch her," Jake said, straightening. "Odin's got medical training. He'll alert if her condition changes." Elena stared at the 2 dogs, the warrior and the innocent, and felt a fresh wave of tears threaten. She blinked them back. "Ya need to eat," Jake said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He moved to the kitchenette, pulling out supplies with efficient movements. Within minutes, he'd heated a can of soup on the gas camp stove and poured it into 2 enamel mugs. He handed one to Elena and gestured to the table. "Sit, drink, then we talk." Elena sat. The soup was simple, chicken and rice, but it was hot, and as she swallowed the first spoonful, she realized she hadn't eaten in over 12 hours. Her hands were still shaking, but the warmth helped. Jake sat across from her, his own mug untouched. He pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket and a pen. "Okay," he said, his voice shifting into something harder, more focused. "I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Who knows about your investigation?" Elena set down her mug, her mind racing. "My supervisor at the AG's office, the lead FBI agent I was supposed to meet today, Agent Caldwell, and my partner, another forensic accountant named Marcus Chen." "Anyone else?" "No. We kept it compartmentalized. We knew there were leaks in local law enforcement, so we didn't trust anyone outside federal jurisdiction." Jake made a note. "But they knew where you lived." "Yes," Elena said, her stomach twisting. "They were waiting outside my apartment this morning. 2 men in a black SUV. I saw them when I took Bailey out for her walk. I recognized one of them from surveillance photos, Dmitri. I knew if I went inside I'd never come out, so I ran. Smart, Jake said. Your car was already packed? No, I had a go bag in the trunk, always have. After my mom died, I got paranoid about emergencies. The bag had cash, a change of clothes, copies of some documents, but the main files, the real evidence, that's in a safety deposit box in Seattle, which you told Dmitri about. Elena's face crumpled. I had to. They were going to kill Bailey. They were... Hey, Jake cut her off, his voice firm but not unkind. I'm not judging. I'm assessing. You gave them actionable intel under duress. That means we have a timeline. How fast can they get to that box? Elena forced herself to think past the panic. The bank is closed on Sundays. They'd need a warrant or someone on the inside to access it. Earliest is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Jake nodded, making another note. So, we've got roughly 14 hours before they get what they want. After that, you become a liability they don't need alive. He looked up, his gray-green eyes hard. Which means we've got two options. We run, put you in protective custody, and hope the feds can keep you alive long enough to testify. Or what? Elena asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Or we go on the offensive, Jake said. We get to that safety deposit box first. We secure the evidence, copy it, and make sure it reaches the FBI even if something happens to you. Then we set a trap, use you as bait to draw out the Bratva leadership and take them down before they can regroup. Elena stared at him. You're talking about using me as bait. I'm talking about making them think they won, Jake corrected. Big difference. You're insane, Elena whispered. But even as she said it, she felt something shift inside her, an ember of anger, fanned into life. She thought of Bailey, bleeding and terrified. She thought of Dimitri's smile. She thought of 6 months of work, of justice delayed and justice denied. She thought of the $200 million that represented lives destroyed, families ruined, communities bled dry. If I run, Elena said slowly, they'll keep hunting me. And even if the feds protect me, people like Dmitri don't go down easy. The trial could take years. They'll come after me, my friends, anyone I've ever cared about. Yes, Jake said bluntly. That's exactly what will happen. But if we do this, if we go after them, it ends faster. Maybe, Jake said, or maybe we both end up in the Sound. I won't lie to you, Elena. This is the riskier play. Elena looked past him to where Bailey lay on the couch, Odin's warmth keeping her safe. The retriever's breathing was even now, her eyes closed, her body finally relaxed. Bailey had never hurt anyone in her life. She was a therapy dog, gentle, trusting, trained to comfort and heal. And they had beaten her, thrown her toward death, treated her like trash. Elena's hands stopped shaking. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Jake's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, respect, maybe, or recognition. The look of one fighter acknowledging another. "I need you to trust me," he said, "and I need you to be ready to move fast when the time comes. Can you do that?" Elena met his gaze and nodded. "Yes." "Good." Jake stood, draining his cold soup in one swallow. "We've got until dawn to plan. Get some rest. You're going to need it." But before Elena could respond, Odin's head snapped up from the couch. The Belgian Malinois' ears swiveled forward, his body going rigid. A low, vibrating growl emanated from deep in his chest, a sound that raised the hair on Elena's arms. Jake's hand moved to his weapon in one smooth motion. "What is it, boy?" Odin stared at the door, his hackles rising. From outside, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a vehicle engine, then another, then a third. Jake's jaw tightened. They found us. He looked at Elena, and in his eyes she saw the shift, the transformation from concerned rescuer to lethal operator. "Change of plans," Jake said, his voice dropping into command mode. "We're not waiting until dawn." He moved to the gun safe, spinning the combination lock. The door swung open, revealing an arsenal. Rifles, tactical gear, ammunition, and something that made Elena's eyes widen. Night vision goggles and a suppressed carbine. Jake started pulling items out, his movements precise and practiced. "What are you doing?" Elena asked, her voice climbing with panic. Jake looked at her, and his smile was a cold, predatory thing. "What I was trained to do," he said. "I'm going hunting." If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. The headlights cut through the fog like searchlights, 3 vehicles crawling up the mountain road in tactical formation. Jake watched them through his rifle scope from the loft window, counting silhouettes. 12 hostiles, he muttered. 3 vehicles, professional spacing. He lowered the scope and looked at Elena, who was pressed against the wall, her face pale. They brought reinforcements. "What do we do?" Elena whispered. Jake's expression was carved from stone. "Odin, watch." The Belgian Malinois positioned himself between the door and Elena, his body coiled and ready. Jake turned to Elena. "You stay here. You don't open that door for anyone but me. Understand? You're going out there, alone, against 12 men? I've had worse odds." Jake moved to the gun safe and pulled out a tactical vest, strapping it on with practiced efficiency. He grabbed the suppressed carbine, checked the magazine, chambered around. They're expecting a scared accountant hiding in a cabin. They're not expecting an ambush. "Jake, this is insane. This is what I do." He looked at her, his eyes hard but not unkind. "I'm a SEAL, Elena. This terrain, these conditions at night, this is my world." They just walked into it. Before she could protest further, Jake grabbed his night vision goggles and moved to the door. He paused, looking back at Odin. "Protect her, boy. Attack command is yours if anyone breaches that door." Odin's ears flicked forward once. Acknowledgement. Then Jake was gone, melting into the darkness like smoke. Outside, the fog had thickened to the point where visibility was less than 20 feet. Perfect. Jake moved through it like a ghost, his footsteps silent on the pine needles, his breathing controlled. He'd spent the last 2 weeks learning every inch of this terrain, every tree, every depression, every approach vector. The Bratva enforcers were good. They moved with discipline, weapons up, covering angles. But they were urban operators, used to concrete and clear sight lines. Here, in Jake's domain, they were blind. Jake positioned himself on a rocky outcropping 40 yards from the cabin, elevated, with a clear view of the kill zone. He settled into a prone position, his carbine braced, his breathing slowing to almost nothing. The first enforcer moved into his sight picture. Young, maybe 25, carrying an AK pattern rifle. He was scanning the cabin windows, looking for movement. Jake's finger rested on the trigger. The suppressor would muffle the shot to a quiet pfft, lost in the wind and fog, but he didn't fire. Not yet. He needed them tighter, clustered, overconfident. Building is dark, the young enforcer said in Russian, his voice carrying in the still air. Maybe they ran. Check it, came a deeper voice. Dmitri. The enforcer was here personally, his arm in a sling from Odin's bite, his face a mask of rage even through Jake's night vision. 4 men moved toward the cabin door. 2 covered, 2 advanced. Textbook entry tactics. Jake adjusted his aim, not at the men, at the lead vehicle's front tire. He fired twice. Both front tires exploded with sharp hisses. The vehicle sagged forward, disabled. Chaos erupted. The enforcers spun, trying to locate the shooter, their flashlight beams cutting uselessly through the fog. "Sniper! Cover!" Dmitri roared. They scattered, diving behind vehicles and trees. Jake was already moving, relocating to a position 30 yards to their left. He moved without sound, without haste, a shadow among shadows. One enforcer made the mistake of exposing himself, peering around a truck's bumper with his weapon up. Jake's carbine coughed once. The man dropped, clutching his shoulder, screaming. Non-lethal. Jake wasn't here to kill. He was here to terrify. "He's in the trees," someone shouted. "Flank left." 3 enforcers broke from cover, moving in a wedge toward Jake's last position. But Jake wasn't there. He was already behind them. He emerged from the fog like a nightmare, his K-bar knife in hand. The first man never heard him. Jake's hand clamped over his mouth, the blade pressed to his throat. Not cutting, just pressure. "Drop the weapon, or I open your throat," Jake whispered in Russian, his accent flawless. The rifle clattered to the ground. Jake drove his knee into the man's spine, sending him face first into the dirt, unconscious. The second enforcer spun, raising his weapon. Jake was faster. He closed the distance in 2 steps, redirecting the barrel with his left hand while his right drove the knife's pommel into the man's temple. Another body dropped. The third enforcer got a shot off. Wild, panicked, the muzzle flashed bright in the darkness. The bullet whined past Jake's ear, missing by inches. Jake didn't flinch. He moved inside the shooter's guard, stripped the weapon with a brutal wrist lock, and delivered a hammer fist to the man's jaw. 3 down in 5 seconds. Fall back to the vehicles." Dimitri's voice was shrill now, panic replacing command. But falling back meant exposing their backs, and Jake was already hunting. He circled wide, using the fog and terrain to stay invisible. He picked off another enforcer with a tackle from behind, choking him unconscious before he could scream. Another tried to run and took a suppressed round to the leg, collapsing with a howl. Inside the cabin, Elena heard the gunfire, muffled, sporadic, terrifying. She crouched behind the couch, her arms wrapped around Bailey, while Odin stood at the door, a statue of focused violence. "Please, let him be okay," Elena whispered. "Please." Outside, Jake was dismantling an army. Dmitri stood by the lead SUV, his remaining 6 men clustered around him, their weapons pointing in every direction, seeing nothing. "Who is this man?" One of them gasped. "He is Ghost." "He's one man," Dmitri snarled, though his voice trembled. "He bleeds like anyone else." "Then why are we losing?" another shouted. Dmitri had no answer. From the darkness, Jake's voice cut through the fog. Calm, cold, and utterly devoid of mercy. "You came to my mountain," Jake called out. "You brought violence to my home. Now you're going to learn what happens when you hunt a predator." Dmitri spun, firing blindly into the trees. His men followed suit, their muzzle flashes strobing the fog, their bullets shredding bark and leaves and empty air. Jake was already gone, circling behind them. When the firing stopped, the silence was deafening. "Reload!" Dmitri screamed, reload, and Odin's attack bark shattered the night. The Belgian Malinois had heard Jake's signal, a sharp whistle, 2 tones. The cabin door exploded outward as Odin launched himself through it, a missile of fur and fangs. He hit the nearest enforcer at a full sprint, 75 pounds of trained aggression driving the man into the SUV's hood. Odin's jaws locked on the man's forearm, shaking violently, and the enforcer's weapon tumbled away. "The dog! Kill the dog!" Dmitri shouted. 2 enforcers turned their weapons toward Odin, and Jake stepped out of the fog behind them. "Bad idea," he said. He moved like liquid death. The first enforcer took a rifle, butt to the back of the skull, dropping instantly. The second spun, trying to bring his weapon around, and Jake disarmed him with a joint lock that snapped bone with an audible crack. Dmitri was backing away now, his face white with terror, his injured arm clutched to his chest. Only 3 of his men were still standing, and they looked ready to run. "You," Jake said, pointing at Dmitri with his carbine. "On your knees. Now." "Do you know who I work for?" Dmitri spat, trying to summon his old arrogance. "The Russian Bratva does not forgive." Jake fired. The suppressed round sparked off the concrete inches from Dmitri's foot. "I said, on your knees." Dmitri's legs folded. He dropped, his face crumpling. Jake kept the carbine trained on him while Odin maintained his hold on the downed enforcer. "The rest of you," Jake called to the surviving men. "Weapons down, hands on your heads. You run, and my dog hunts you down, and he doesn't give warnings." One by one, the enforcers complied, dropping their rifles, kneeling with their hands laced behind their heads. Jake moved through them like a reaper, zip-tying wrists with plastic flex cuffs he'd pulled from his vest. When he reached Dmitri, he leaned down, his voice a whisper. "You came here to kill an innocent woman and a dog. You failed. Now you're going to tell me everything. Who gave the order, where your boss is, and how we end this." Dmitri's laugh was broken, bitter. "You think you have won? You are nothing. 1 man. Volkov has army." Jake grabbed Dmitri by the throat, lifting him onto his toes. "Then I'll go through his army one by one until I get to him, starting with you." He released Dmitri, who collapsed, gasping. "Odin, release! Guard!" The Belgian Malinois let go of his target and moved to sit in front of the kneeling prisoners, his teeth bared, his eyes locked on their throats. Anyone who moved would lose something important. Jake pulled out his satellite phone, one of the few pieces of gear that worked this far off-grid, and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago. It rang twice. "Caldwell," a woman's voice answered, sharp and professional. "Agent Caldwell, this is Lieutenant Commander Jake Mercer, SEAL Team 3, retired. I'm calling on behalf of Elena Vasquez. She's alive, and I have 12 Bratva enforcers gift-wrapped for you at my location." He rattled off the coordinates. "You've got maybe 2 hours before their backup arrives. I suggest you hurry." There was a pause. "Commander Mercer, this is highly irregular." "So is attempting to murder a federal witness." Jake cut her off. "Elena has the evidence you need. Get here, secure these men, and she'll tell you everything. Clock's ticking, Agent." He hung up. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Elena stepped out, Bailey limping beside her, Odin's earlier protection having given the retriever enough courage to move. Elena's eyes swept over the scene, the disabled vehicles, the zip-tied enforcers, Jake standing in the center of it all like an avenging angel. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice small. Jake looked at her, and for the first time since this began, his expression softened. "This part is, but we're not done yet." The FBI arrived in a convoy of black SUVs 30 minutes before dawn, their headlights cutting through the dissipating fog like searchlights announcing the cavalry's arrival. Agent Rebecca Caldwell stepped out of the lead vehicle. A woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at the scene. 12 men zip-tied and guarded by a Belgian Malinois with blood on his muzzle, and let out a low whistle. "Commander Mercer, I presume?" she said, approaching Jake with her hand extended. Jake shook it, his grip firm. "Just Jake now, Agent. I'm retired." "Could have fooled me," Caldwell said, gesturing to the subdued enforcers. "This looks like an active combat operation." "They brought it to my doorstep," Jake replied flatly. "I just finished it." While her team processed the prisoners, Caldwell sat with Jake and Elena at the cabin's pine table. Elena had spent the last hour writing everything down. Names, dates, account numbers, shell companies. Her handwriting was shaky but legible, the words spilling out in a torrent of testimony. Caldwell read through it with an expression that grew progressively darker. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at Elena with something close to awe. "Ms. Vasquez, this is the most comprehensive financial conspiracy case I've seen in 20 years, she said. "If even half of this holds up in court, we can dismantle the entire Volkov operation." "It'll hold up," Elena said, her voice steady now. "I've got documentation for every claim. Transaction records, wire transfers, witness statements. It's all in the safety deposit box." "Which they know about," Caldwell said grimly. "Dmitri sang like a canary once we mentioned federal conspiracy charges. He confirmed that Volkov himself gave the kill order. They were planning to retrieve the evidence from your bank this morning, destroy it, and make you disappear permanently." Elena's face went pale. "Volkov himself? I never thought. I knew he was the head of the organization, but I didn't think he'd get personally involved." "You became personal when you cost him $200 million, Caldwell said. "Men like Viktor Volkov don't tolerate that kind of exposure. He's been untouchable for 30 years. Legitimate businesses on the surface, corruption and violence underneath. You were about to pull back the curtain." Jake had been silent, listening, but now he leaned forward. "So, what's your play, Agent? Protective custody? Witness security?" "That's the standard protocol," Caldwell began. "It won't work," Jake interrupted. "Volkov's got resources, money, connections, people on the inside. You put Elena in a safe house, and he'll find her. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually. And then all of this, everything she risked, it's for nothing." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "What are you suggesting, Commander?" "I'm suggesting we don't wait for him to come after her again," Jake said. "We go after him. Now. Tonight. Before he has time to regroup or run." "That's not how we operate." "Then change how you operate." Jake's voice was hard as iron. "You've got Dmitri in custody. He knows where Volkov is. Use him. Set up a meet. Tell Volkov his men succeeded, that they've got Elena. Draw him out." "Using her as bait," Caldwell said slowly. "Using me as bait," Elena corrected, and both Jake and Caldwell turned to her in surprise. She met their gazes steadily. "I'm already a target. At least this way. I'm a target with a plan. And if it means ending this tonight instead of spending years looking over my shoulder, I'll do it." Caldwell studied her for a long moment, then looked at Jake. "You'd be with her? Providing security?" "Every step," Jake said. "Odin, too. They want Elena. They go through us first." Caldwell was silent, weighing options. Finally, she nodded. All right, but we do this my way. Full federal support, tactical team on standby. And if it goes sideways, we extract immediately. Agreed? Agreed, Jake said. Elena nodded, though her hands trembled beneath the table. They had 6 hours to prepare. Dmitri, faced with federal conspiracy charges and the prospect of life in prison, broke completely. He gave them everything. Volkov's location, a waterfront estate in Bellingham, 2 hours north. His security detail, 8 men, heavily armed former Russian military. His schedule, he'd be there tonight, meeting with his accountants to assess the damage from Elena's investigation. He's paranoid, Dmitri said through swollen lips, his arm still bandaged from Odin's bite. Doesn't trust phones, does all major business in person. You want him, tonight is your chance. Caldwell's team moved with military precision. They secured the safety deposit box in Seattle, copying every document, photographing every record. They assembled a tactical unit, 10 agents, all with combat experience. They requisitioned equipment, body armor, communications gear, surveillance drones. Jake spent the time preparing Elena. You're going to be terrified, he told her as they sat in the cabin while Odin and Bailey rested on the couch, the retriever finally eating and drinking. Your heart will be pounding so hard you'll think everyone can hear it. Your hands will shake. That's normal. That's your body keeping you alive. How do I make it stop? Elena asked. You don't, Jake said. You use it. Fear sharpens your senses, speeds your reaction time. The key is not letting it control you. He leaned forward, holding her gaze. When we're in there, you stay behind me. You don't speak unless I tell you to. And if I give you an order, run, hide, get down, you do it immediately. No questions. Understood? Elena nodded. What about Bailey? Bailey stays here with Caldwell's team, Jake said gently. This is no place for her. She's done her part. They looked over at the couch where Odin had his head resting protectively across Bailey's back, the 2 dogs breathing in sync. He won't want to leave her, Elena said softly. He's a soldier, Jake replied. He'll do his duty. At 1900 hours, they loaded into the vehicles. Elena wore a borrowed FBI jacket and a wire. Jake was in full tactical gear, plate carrier, comms headset, his Sig Sauer on his hip, and the carbine slung across his chest. Odin sat in the back, his K9 vest marking him as official law enforcement. As they drove north through the darkening evening, Caldwell briefed them over the radio. Volkov's estate is on a private peninsula, surrounded by water on 3 sides. One access road, gated with guards. The main house is 3 stories, concrete and steel construction. He's got cameras, motion sensors, and a panic room. This isn't going to be a quiet entry. Then we make noise, Jake said. We go in hard and fast. Overwhelming force, no warning. He doesn't get time to destroy evidence or escape. Rules of engagement? One of the tactical agents asked. Lethal force authorized if threatened, Caldwell said. But our priority is taking Volkov alive. He's worth more in a courtroom than a body bag. Jake glanced at Elena in the seat beside him. She was pale, her jaw set, her hands clasped tight in her lap. You good? He asked quietly. She looked at him, and he saw the fear there, but also something else. Resolve. Let's end this, she said. The Volkov estate looked like something from a Mafia movie. A modern fortress of glass and steel perched on a cliff with floodlights illuminating manicured lawns and the black water of the bay beyond. The gate was reinforced steel, flanked by stone pillars topped with security cameras. The FBI didn't bother with subtlety. At exactly 2100 hours, An armored bearcat rammed through the gate, the steel crumpling like aluminum foil. The tactical team poured through behind it, moving in coordinated stacks, flashbangs detonating with concussive booms that shattered windows and deafened the guards. Jake and Odin moved with the lead element, Elena tucked safely behind the line with Caldwell and 2 agents assigned specifically to her protection. The first guard ran out of the gatehouse with his rifle raised. "FBI, drop the weapon," an agent shouted. The guard hesitated a fatal second too long. A beanbag round from a less lethal shotgun caught him in the chest, slamming him backward. "Clear left." "Moving right." The teams flowed through the compound like water, overwhelming Volkov's security through sheer numbers and superior tactics. 2 more guards were taken down with beanbag rounds and tasers. A third tried to run and found himself facing Odin. "Stellen," Jake commanded, German for freeze. The guard looked at the Belgian Malinois' bared teeth and very wisely raised his hands. They reached the main house. The front doors were reinforced, but the breaching charge turned them into splinters. The FBI flooded inside and found themselves in a standoff. Viktor Volkov stood in the center of his marble-floored foyer, surrounded by his remaining 4 bodyguards. He was a man in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Jake's truck. But what made everyone freeze was what he held in his hand. A dead man's switch, wired to blocks of C4 strapped to the pillars supporting the building. "Welcome to my home," Volkov said in heavily accented English, his voice calm and conversational. "I'm sorry I cannot offer you tea, but you have come at such an inconvenient time." Caldwell stepped forward, her weapon lowered but ready. "Viktor Volkov, you're under arrest for—" "For what?" Volkov interrupted, smiling. "For being successful businessman? For building empire from nothing? You have no proof of anything." "We have 200 pages of financial records," Caldwell said. "We have testimony from your own men. You have fairy tales," Volkov said. His eyes scanned the room until they found Elena, partially hidden behind an agent. His smile widened. "Ah, the little accountant. You've caused me much trouble, Devushka." Elena stepped forward before anyone could stop her. Jake's hand shot out, but she was already moving, her fear burned away by 6 months of anger. "You've murdered people," Elena said, her voice ringing clear in the cavernous space. "You've destroyed families, poisoned communities, corrupted everything you've touched. And you call yourself a businessman?" Volkov's smile faded. "You know nothing of what I have built." "I know everything," Elena shot back. "Every dollar you've laundered, every politician you've bought, every life you've destroyed. And now everyone else will know too." Volkov's thumb twitched on the dead man's switch. "Perhaps, but knowledge dies with the knower, yes? I release this switch and we all die together. Is very poetic." The room went deathly silent. Jake studied Volkov carefully. The man's hand was steady, but his eyes kept flicking to a door on the left. The panic room. He was stalling, waiting for something. Jake caught Caldwell's eye and tapped his ear twice, their signal for a private channel. "He's bluffing," Jake whispered into his comms. "The C4 isn't wired. It's a prop. Look at the det cord. It's not connected to the blasting caps." Caldwell's eyes narrowed as she examined the setup. Jake was right. The explosives were real, but the detonation system was theater. "On my mark," Caldwell whispered. "Take the bodyguards. I've got Volkov." "Odin's got the runner," Jake added, because he knew what was about to happen. Caldwell raised her voice. "Mr. Volkov, let's talk about a deal." Volkov's mask cracked. He knew they'd figured it out. His eyes went wide, and he threw the dead man's switch. Nothing exploded. Volkov bolted for the panic room door. "Fass!" Jake commanded, German for attack. Odin was a blur. The Belgian Malinois closed the 30-foot distance in under 3 seconds, hitting Volkov at a full sprint. His jaws locked onto Volkov's calf, and he wrenched the man down with savage efficiency. Volkov hit the marble floor face first with a sickening crack. Simultaneously, the FBI tactical team moved on the bodyguards. It was over in seconds. Wrists zip-tied, weapons confiscated, threats neutralized. Caldwell rolled Volkov onto his back, pressing her knee into his spine while she cuffed him. "Viktor Volkov, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, and really pissing me off." Volkov's nose was bleeding, his expensive suit torn by Odin's teeth. But worst of all, his arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed look of a man who had finally lost. "Odin, aus," Jake commanded. "Release." The Belgian Malinois let go immediately, backing away but keeping his eyes locked on Volkov. His tail gave a single, satisfied wag. Jake walked over and scratched behind Odin's ears. "Good boy. That's a good boy." Elena stood in the center of the foyer, surrounded by FBI agents and the ruins of the Bratva Empire, and, for the first time in 6 months, she felt like she could breathe. It was over. 6 weeks later, the courthouse in Seattle was packed. Viktor Volkov sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by lawyers who knew they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony from Dmitri and a dozen other enforcers, and Elena's meticulous documentation that had torn apart the Bratva's operations layer by layer. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Elena sat in the gallery between Agent Caldwell and Jake, with Bailey lying at her feet and Odin sitting at attention beside Jake. She felt tears stream down her face, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief. Volkov was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Dmitri and his associates, having cooperated with prosecutors, received lighter sentences, but they would still spend the next decade behind bars. The Bratva's financial empire was dismantled. Over $180 million in assets were seized and distributed to the victims of their crimes. Corrupt officials were exposed and removed from office. The shipping lanes they'd controlled were cleaned up. Cape Mercy was free. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Elena. She gave a brief statement, thanking the FBI and carefully avoiding any mention of the SEAL who had saved her life. Jake had made her promise. He didn't want the attention, didn't want his name in the papers. He was a ghost, and ghosts stayed in the shadows. But as she walked down the courthouse steps, she found him waiting by his truck, Odin sitting patiently in the passenger seat. "You came," Elena said, surprised. "Wanted to see how it ended," Jake replied. "Plus, Bailey would have never forgiven me if I didn't say goodbye." At the mention of her name, the golden retriever's tail started wagging furiously. She pressed against Elena's legs, healthy now, her ribs healed, the scar above her ear hidden by fur. Elena looked at Jake. This man who had appeared from nowhere, saved her life, dismantled an empire, and asked for nothing in return. "How do I thank you?" she asked, her voice breaking. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his truck and pulled out a small wooden box. He handed it to her. Inside was a leather collar, military grade with a metal nameplate. It read, Bailey, Honorary K9, Courage Under Fire. Odin and I voted, Jake said with a rare smile. She earned it. Elena pressed the box to her chest, unable to speak. Jake started to get into his truck, but Elena caught his arm. If you ever need anything, she said, anything at all, I'm in your debt. Jake looked at her, and his expression softened. You don't owe me anything, Elena. You did the hard part. You stood up when everyone else looked away. I just made sure you lived long enough to finish the job. He climbed into the truck, Odin shifting to make room. As the engine rumbled to life, Jake rolled down the window. Take care of that dog, he said. She's braver than most soldiers I've known. And then he was gone, the black truck disappearing into Seattle traffic, carrying its cargo of warriors back to the mountains and the fog. 3 months later, Elena stood on the deck of Jake's cabin, a mug of coffee steaming in her hands, watching the sunrise paint the sound in shades of gold and crimson. The fog had lifted for once, revealing the vast expanse of water and forest that stretched to the horizon. She had driven up for the weekend, a promise she'd made to herself to check on the man who had saved her life. She'd expected to find him alone, isolated, still haunted by the ghosts he carried. Instead, she found him building. The cabin had doubled in size. A new wing extended from the original structure, its wood fresh and pale. Tools lay scattered across a tarp. The sound of hammering echoed through the trees. You're expanding, Elena said as Jake emerged from the new construction, sawdust in his hair. Had some time on my hands, Jake replied. He gestured to the addition. Figured if I'm going to live up here, might as well have room for guests. Guests, Elena repeated with a smile. You mean people? I mean friends, Jake corrected, and there was warmth in his voice she hadn't heard before. They spent the day working together, Elena measuring and cutting lumber, while Jake assembled the frame. Odin and Bailey played in the clearing, the golden retriever chasing the Belgian Malinois through the underbrush, both dogs barking with pure joy. She's good for him, Jake said, watching them. Odin spent 8 years at war. He forgot how to play. Bailey's reminding him. And what about you? Elena asked. What's she reminding you of? Jake was quiet for a long time, his hands stilling on the hammer. That there's more to life than missions and violence. That sometimes the best thing you can do is just be still. As the sun set, they sat on the deck watching the sky turn purple. Bailey lay between them, her head on Elena's lap, while Odin rested against Jake's leg. I'm leaving the AG's office, Elena said suddenly, going into private practice, specializing in financial crimes, helping victims recover stolen assets. Good, Jake said. The world needs more people like you. I learned from the best, Elena replied. She looked at him. What about you? What's next? Jake stared out at the horizon. Honestly, I don't know. For the first time in 20 years, I don't have orders, don't have a mission. It's strange. Maybe that's okay, Elena said. Maybe the mission now is just to heal. Jake looked at her, then down at Odin and Bailey, and something in his chest, something that had been locked tight for years, finally began to loosen. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe it is. As darkness fell over Cape Mercy, Jake built a fire in the pit outside the cabin. Elena brought out blankets, and they sat beneath the stars watching the flames dance while the dogs slept at their feet. Can I tell you something? Elena asked. Something I haven't told anyone? Always, Jake replied. That day on the dock, when they were about to throw Bailey into the water, I thought I was going to die, and I was okay with it. But the thought of her dying, of her being hurt because of me, that was unbearable. She paused, her voice thick. You saved her life. But more than that, you showed me that there are still people who will stand up, who will fight, who will choose courage when it would be easier to walk away. Jake poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the night. I almost did walk away, he admitted. When I saw those vehicles from my cabin, my first instinct was to mind my own business. I'd spent 6 months trying to forget what I was, what I'd done. I wanted peace. What changed your mind? Odin, Jake said simply, looking at the sleeping Belgian Malinois. He heard the gunshots and looked at me like, are we going to do something about this? And I realized, you can retire from the military, but you can't retire from who you are. I'm a protector. That's not a job. That's who I am. Elena reached over and took his hand. Thank you for being who you are. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the dogs breathing in sync. And for the first time since he'd left the service, Jake felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Purpose. The next morning, as Elena packed up to leave, she found Jake in the new addition, installing windows. This is beautiful work, she said, running her hand along the smooth wood. It's a start, Jake replied. Thinking, maybe I turn this place into something bigger. A retreat for veterans, a place where guys like me can come to decompress, to heal, bring their K9 partners if they have them. Elena's eyes widened. Jake, that's incredible. It's just an idea, he said, but there was excitement in his voice. Would need funding, certifications, staff. I know people, Elena said immediately. Donors, nonprofits, I could help. Jake looked at her and a smile, genuine and warm, crossed his face. Yeah? Yeah. As Elena drove back down the mountain, Bailey asleep in the passenger seat, she watched Jake and Odin in her rearview mirror. They stood on the cabin deck, silhouetted against the rising sun, and they looked like what they were, warriors finding peace. Closing message. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Was it when Odin caught Bailey midair, when Jake took on 12 men in the fog, or when justice was finally served? We read every comment. This story reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. That loyalty runs deeper than blood, and that sometimes the greatest missions are the ones we never planned for. In a world that often feels dark, remember this: there are still protectors among us. There are still people who will stand between evil and the innocent. There are still warriors who understand that true strength is using your power to defend those who cannot defend themselves. God bless, and see you in the next story.